Teach me about the Great Lakes. Teach me about the Great Lakes. Welcome back to Teach Me About the Great Lakes, a twice-monthly podcast in which I, a Great Lakes novice, ask people who are smarter and harder working than I am to teach me all about the Great Lakes. My name is Stuart Carlton, and I am joined today. Oh my goodness. It cannot be. Can it be? It can be. The one, the only Hope Charters. Hope, it's been a minute. How are you doing?
It's me. I'm doing all right.
That's good. I'm so glad you could be back on. Actually, the main reason is I want to start off with some follow-up that I've been holding on to for months and months. Because, well, you were on our live episode, which everybody should go listen to, which was live from the Carefully Enunciated JASM conference. But you were last on, I think it was last year, and we ended up talking about Petoskey stones. Do you remember that conversation?
Yes, I do, because I found one.
You found one. Yeah. Well, the other day, this is the important follow-up. I was reading a book with my 3-year-old daughter called Tallulah, Mermaid of the Great Lakes, which is a very cool book. I mean, it's a typical kid story that it's all about finding your own identity. It's okay to stick out or whatever. But I won't give it away because I don't want to spoil one of the very few kids' books that isn't about just getting your kid to go to sleep. But Petoskey stones play a key role in that. And so I was thinking about you. So have you found any more Petoskey stones since then?
I have not, but I'm about to go visit Lake Huron, where Jay, our former buoy specialist, lives on an island. So maybe I'll find some then.
Maybe you'll find some then. That is
or
excellent.
pudding stones too.
Pudding stones too. That's right. Pudding stones, Petoskey stones, all kind of stones. That is fantastic news. Well, great. Well, we're going to get right into it because not only do we have a very fun interview today, but we are also going to go again with our brand new, most popular segment, the Great Lakes News. But first, it's time for the Great Lakes News theme. And now it's time for the Great Lakes News. Here's your host, Stuart Carlton. Thank you, Stuart, for that introduction. And actually, today we have a guest co-host for the Great Lakes News. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Sandra Svoboda, who is the program director for Great Lakes Now and an actual news professional.
Yes.
Sandra, how are you? Thank you for coming.
I'm great, Stuart. Thanks for having me. Professional is a lofty word. I hope I can live up to this.
Oh, on this show, you definitely can. We're in no way concerned. That's great. So real quick, before we get going, so you're going to be doing a guest hosting stint on Great Lakes News for at least the next few segments. So tell us a little bit, though, before we get going. So we're not going to do this every time, but tell us about Great Lakes Now. What is this exactly?
Great Lakes Now is an initiative that is housed at Detroit Public Television, but we cover the entire Great Lakes region, U.S. and Canada, all 5 lakes, the watersheds. So all the news about the Great Lakes. We say news about the lakes you love. We also do drinking water stories. Because we're PBS, of course, we have a monthly television show. It airs in several of the states around the region and a YouTube channel. Come subscribe. And the reason I'm here, that news professional part, is we have a website, greatlakesnow.org. I almost said Great Lakes News, greatlakesnow.org. And we post, sometimes several stories a day about what's going on around the region with the science and the policy and the tourism and all history and culture and all kinds of things about Great Lakes. So news about the lakes you love. Don't steal that mantra.
We won't. That's too...
All right, we can share it, Stuart.
It's all yours. Well, we'll see. Let's see how this goes first. Fantastic. Well, and so my understanding, based on the fact that we've emailed several times about it, is that you have brought 3 news stories from your website to us today. Is that correct?
I have. I picked some stories I thought you, and of course your listeners, most importantly your listeners, but I did pick some that I thought...
No, this show is not about them. No. This show is all about exactly one person. Let's not kid ourselves.
Okay, Stuart, they're just for you and maybe Hope, a little bit for Hope. I brought you 3, so I hope, we are recording this, of course, podcasts are not live. We all know that. So I urge your listeners, if they want to see the stories, they might have to scroll down on our site to more news, additional news stories by the time they get there.
Yeah. First of all, do that, because get more news from the website. Go ahead and do that. But second of all, if not...
Spend more time on our website.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
why I'm
it's
here.
No problem. Yeah, or if not, you can just look at the show notes in your podcast player, and we'll link to these stories directly.
Perfect. The beauty of digital. So the first story I bring you is a little bit of a warning. Stuart, how much Great Lakes fish do you eat each week?
Me, Great Lakes fish each week. On the average week, I eat, Titus, are you listening? He's not going to like this. I on the average week eat 0 servings of Great Lakes fish.
Well, and one of the principles of journalism is to bring in several viewpoints. So the fishing industry may not like that very much, but the health advocates might be okay with it, because the story we have up, we have a lot of content partnerships at Great Lakes now. We're pretty small, very mighty, and we do a lot of content, but we also share. And so this story actually came to us from the Great Lakes Echo. So I want to give them a little credit too. When we share from our partners and they share our work, right? Scratching back.
Yes, exactly.
Anyway, so this is a story about about warnings about how much Great Lakes fish you should eat, or a warning about how much not to eat to stay healthier, because unfortunately we still have a lot of contaminants in the ecosystem, and they get into the fish. And then when we eat the fish, they get into... Who do you think, Stuart? When we eat the fish, who gets the contaminants?
I think it's me. I think I get the contaminants.
Yes, it's us. Very good. Very good. So at least, I don't know what your other habits are, Stuart, but at least if you're not eating too much Great Lakes fish, you've got a check in the healthy habits column. But, I encourage you to eat a little bit more. It's pretty good stuff.
No, it is. This is actually something we talk about a lot at Sea Grant, in all honesty. Eating fish is complex because of contaminants, right? And that's not just Great Lakes fish. That's kind of all fish. And that's even without getting into the issues of the sustainability of the catch, right? There's somebody right now who I don't think he's a listener, but he's pressing us to talk about the sustainability of different fisheries and things like that. So we may get to that at some point. But it is a trade-off, right? Because fish are otherwise they're very healthful. And another complication is what is safe is very localized a lot of times, right? Like, I mean, even within specific bays, what it'll look like is can vary. And so eating fish is a very complex issue just from a health standpoint.
Yes. The story we have is actually reporting about a recent study from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. It was published, peer-reviewed, scientific, not just something we pulled off the random internets out there. So the
Great Lakes Now advantage, right? Yeah.
Right. You said professional journalist, professional news here. So the recommended fish intake is just 2 meals or 12 ounces per week, as suggested by the EPA. And so the study found that about 5 million people were exceeding that in our region. They looked at several states, and they found that disproportionately women, younger people, non-white people are the ones that are eating more of the fish, not because they're necessarily buying it at Whole Foods, but because a lot of people catch it themselves. Here in Detroit, where I am, you see many, many people fishing on the riverfront, the Detroit riverfront. A little geography lesson there, the Detroit River. And there are actually efforts here in Detroit and other Great Lakes cities to put the fish warnings not just in press releases on websites, but actually out there on the riverfront where people are fishing, so that they see them and can undertake a bit of a public health education campaign around this. So thank you for letting me bring this to you to maybe get the words. I mean, your audience is probably pretty smart here, Stuart, but a little more push to just keep an eye on the...
That is it. And the people who, and this is something that I used to look at back when I was at the University of Florida. I did some work with subsistence fishers. And so a lot of times these people are fishing from the docks, are subsistence fishers, and they need that food, right? So that's really complicated. Actually, Sea Grant's done a bit of work on this because Sea Grant is interesting with fishing. Like, we tend to, for better or worse, promote eating sustainably caught, managed, and or farmed seafood. But with that, there are these caveats, and so actually we have a fair number of resources. For example, we're updating right now. There's a fishforhealth.net website. It's a little bit out of date, but we're working on updating that where people can go and look for these sort of local environment or local warnings. But it's big and it's important, and it is challenging, but worth thinking about. Okay, story number 2.
Story number 2. Well, you at Sea Grant and we at a PBS affiliate are all about education. I mean, your podcast title is Teach Me About the Great Lakes. So I
focus on the me more than the teach, but whatever.
Yes, that's very clear. As a listener, I was ready for this. But so I thought I would bring another interesting story from one of our content partners. There is a publication online called The Conversation, which many of the academics in your audience may know about. It's a publication that features writings by academics, but not writing like academics. So they are writing for a more a more general audience, not PhDs and peer-reviewed journals, but they write op-eds and observations and opinion pieces and kinds of editorials, and report on their work in a different way than they do in journals. So it was the Conversation as a site that I read a lot. It's nice to see academics and their expertise, but writing in a way that people like me can understand it. I mean, you've got fancy letters behind your name, so you can read the journals and the news sites, Stuart.
That's questionable. I thought this was really interesting looking at it, because that's another thing we think about a lot is science literacy and science education and what it means exactly.
Generally, we like to write at a 6th to 8th grade level to make sure that our entire audience can understand what we are saying.
And so we're always thinking about that. And science education is tough though, right? Because there's like facts versus the process of science. And so this article was a lot about sort of having people apply the process of science, right? Or learn how to do that in their life.
Yeah, look at you doing your homework before the show, Stuart. I love it. So yes, this is actually the key takeaway for me from this was that science is what the educators found. They did their own little study. The N was only 28 students. So they looked at biology and chemistry students and what they were learning and whether they could apply chemistry to biology lessons and biology to chemistry concepts in the same way. And so really the takeaway from this article is that we are all better served by less memorizing and more understanding concepts, specifically how to relate those concepts in other places, right? So I'll think of a good analogy of bringing math to our website, but we'll move on.
Sure. Fair enough. No, yeah. So I actually taught life and earth science for a couple of years in 7th and 8th grade. This was in Pinellas County, Florida. And I was extraordinarily bad at it. But then we talked a lot about inquiry-based learning was kind of the term du jour. This was back in 2006 or so. And so we talked about that a lot. And I think through that application is what you're doing is training a mind as much as anything. And that's what they say about graduate school a lot, is that you're training yourself how to think. It's not so much what you're doing. But environmental ed, actually, there's like a long history of this. I'm working on a book chapter now, which a lot of people have heard me complain about, because that's what you do in academia is you get all these really cool opportunities, and then you just start complaining about them because they're a lot of work. And so I've been doing that, complaining about a book chapter and looking actually at the history of environmental education, going back all the way to Wilbur Jackman in 1891, who wrote this thing called the Nature Study for the Common Schools, which he was like using nature as a curriculum then and talking about like 21 things you can, studies to do on an earthworm and that kind of stuff. And then I'm tracing that history through like John Dewey, who was maybe one of the greatest, if not the most renowned education philosopher in the 20th century. And then like environmental education started with William Stapp in 1969 and everything. And, but the idea is like, learning facts are good, right? Facts are important, but it's teaching you how to think. And that's especially important, I think, on these science type of classes.
Yes. And in a little bit of shameless self-promotion, one of the reasons we put the story out, not only because science and education, but we at Great Lakes Now, we actually have a set of lesson plans, a collection. We build them out of each show now, each month. And so they're aimed at middle schoolers. And so it's a series of hands-on activities, watching our show segment and readings. And so trying to bring, I've seen a classroom use them, and it was the teaching guide that it comes with has prompt questions. And it was really interesting to see the students talk about how they had seen boats so that they could understand buoyancy. So bringing those concepts together, of course, around in a Great Lakes frame, I'm right with you.
All right. Story number 3.
Story number 3. My favorite phrase is shameless self-promotion, but this time when I say shameless self-promotion, it is for our entire region. So Time Magazine came out with 50 destinations for 2022, and they included 2 Great Lakes cities, Detroit and Toronto.
Toronto.
And so, yes. So we put up a little article about the Time Magazine article. We included a map of all of the 50 destinations with links to the Time articles, but then we talked a little bit more about Detroit and Toronto and what wasn't in Time's reasoning for naming them with our own reasons. So that is our site as well.
That is super. So what is a great reason that people should love Detroit right now?
Well, my reasons are different than Time. Time talked about restaurants and hotels and, revitalization after the famous bankruptcy of almost 10 years ago. And Toronto was lauded for its museums and art and a little bit of the recreation activities, but neither of Time Magazine's write-ups included anything about the Great Lakes, Stuart. That's teaching you something about the Great Lakes. We are often neglected.
Time Magazine, what are they doing? They need to host a podcast. Yeah.
So to actually answer your question, which is what guests are supposed to do for the host of a podcast, I will tell you that obviously my favorite thing about both cities is their location within the Great Lakes and all of the opportunities that brings those of us who are lucky enough to live in these regions for recreational opportunities, understanding our science lessons when we go out and look at the waterfronts, and also just finding it a place where people of all walks of life come together, places like Belle Isle State Park and the Toronto Islands, and all of the great stuff that comes along with being a Great Lakes city or small town.
There we go. Fantastic. I have nothing to add. That was perfect. So, if you have a story that you would like to suggest for Great Lakes News, use the hashtag Great Lakes News on Twitter. Send us an email, teachmeaboutthegreatlakes at gmail.com. And follow everybody. Please follow Great Lakes Now on Twitter. Go to the website, subscribe to YouTube. That means hit the bell, right? Do they need to hit the bell? They need to hit the bell.
They do. They do. We have a weekly newsletter. It comes out on Wednesdays. It's got, oh my gosh, it's probably a competitor to your podcast news because we put news stories in our newsletter. But we'll give you a shout out in that one of these days. Stuart.
It's a big world, a big lake. We can all take it. Not worry about it. Well, fantastic.
Well, Stuart, thanks so much for having me. I think it's okay if I share a theme song with you. So let's play that, shall we?
Yeah, let's just go out with the theme song. News from the lakes you love. Is that right?
Close enough.
Close enough.
News about the lakes you love. GreatLakesNow.org.
So that's what a professional theme song sounds like. That's the Great Lakes Now theme, which was composed by Clint Carpenter. Thank you for that, Clint. So our guest today is the mysterious voice behind the Lake Superior Twitter account. We are super excited to talk to him today. Hello, Lake Superior. How are you?
Good afternoon. Doing well on the breezy shores of Superior.
That is wonderful. So for those of you who don't know, you can follow this Twitter account, Lake Superior, and we'll have a link to it in the show notes. But it's really interesting and has like a really sort of specific and fun tone, I think. So how did this start? I guess tell us a little bit about yourself to the extent that you want to while remaining anonymous. And then why did you do this? What is the deal with starting? Why did you start tweeting?
Well, my personal background is I grew up very close to the shores of Superior. My childhood home was a few hundred yards from the lake. I couldn't quite see Superior from the house. It was just blocked by some trees. And where I stand now, I'm about 640 feet from doorstep to toes in water. So I interact and see the lake every single day. So I do have a long and deep history with Superior.
That's amazing. Do you want to trade houses?
We could find space for you here and just all congregate here.
Yeah, that's fine. I've seen Hope's house. It's a perfectly nice house, but it is more than 640 feet from Lake Superior. So I'd recommend not a trade, more like a visit.
I have no interest in moving further. I'm on a mission to see if I can move any closer than 640 feet away.
Yeah, 640 is a little rough being there sometimes, especially if there's a tree in the way or something.
So the Lake Superior Twitter account was exciting to create, and I came across it. The account was created in March of 2009, and I acquired it from somebody else, I believe in 2010. I saw that they had the Lake Superior handle and was very interested in it. And at the time, it was a stagnant account. And I thought it would be really fun to acquire. And I reached out, and to my surprise, they agreed. They weren't doing anything with it. And it's essentially been more than a decade of building this voice of the most superior lake in the world.
So it wasn't exactly a Dread Pirate Roberts situation, but it was an almost Dread Pirate Roberts, I suppose. So yeah, what about that voice? How did you decide this was the tack that you wanted to? I mean, it's very entertaining, and you probably don't know this because you might not listen. But on the show, we have an unofficial rivalry with Lake Superior, and that we call it somewhat condescending and arrogant. And
yes.
But yeah. So how did you arrive at this this tone? Was that something that came out right away, or did it sort of evolve over time?
It has definitely evolved, and it has been a craft, a practice and craft, and taking on an identity that is of a non-human form. And what other voice can you use for a lake that's called Lake Superior, that's among the Great Lakes? And especially once I came up with this acronym of G.L.O.A.T, of the greatest lake of all time, and then the actual definition of G.L.O.A.T, and gloating, it just all fits so well to just really craft this personality of a sassy, overly confident, best lake in the world voice.
I mean, what in your background led to this? Because I mean, it's so well done. It's so of its era, right? But do you have like a writing or a comedy, background, or is it just something you've developed kind of on the side while you do, I don't know, computer programming or actuarial tables or something?
Yeah, it is a side project that is for fun. I am not a comedian by trade. I've always taken a passion in different creative pursuits, so it has been a creative undertaking for me. But this has been a long road. I mean, it has been over a decade of crafting this voice, and a lot of different really enjoyable moments in that time. But it's fun, and it's nice that it is anonymous, and I can lean into this without expectations other than my own.
How's your voice changed over 10 years? You spent 10 and you've been refining and everything. Is it just a case of sort of slow refinements, or have you made sort of conscious shifts over time?
It's definitely slow refinements, but it's hard to go back a decade and remember what I was tweeting about that long ago.
For me, it was mostly how I liked my coffee every morning. That was my original thing I would tweet every day in about 2008 or 10 or whatever. Yes. It was like, I like my coffee like I like my black. And I did that as like a creative thing for a while. Yeah, but that's all I remember.
Yeah, it's hard. I can't remember, but I do have somewhat of an informal mission now.
Okay.
And really it is I am not a Great Lakes scientist. I am not a scientist of any variety. And with all the various organizations along the Great Lakes, the scientists, environmentalists, limnologists, all of it, it has been fun to create a community of those folks and to elevate their voices when I can. And, by creating my own voice and having this sassy take, it creates a lot of enjoyment for people to create this following. And then I get to kind of relay a message of Great Lakes scientists to lay people who may not know about all the different studies going on. I really enjoy that approach. And the other component is just to celebrate the Great Lakes and the outdoors, and encouraging people to be responsible, to use humor to remind them to not litter and pick up their trash and look after themselves. And where we are today, and probably what led us to this conversation, is a hot political take or two, which changed the course of a 12-year-old Twitter account, changed the course dramatically in the matter of 2 weeks.
Yeah. So about that, we had been following you for much longer, obviously, because of exactly what you're talking about. So at Sea Grant, there are a number of Sea Grant employees who have, public science kind of Twitter feeds. Titus Seilheimer is a good example. Katie O'Reilly who is Dr. Catfish, is going to start working with Illinois Indiana Sea Grant in about 2 weeks, actually. And then we have our Two Yellow Buoys account, and which is an anonymous account. I don't want to say it's modeled after Lake Superior, because it's not, but it's in the same vein, right?
Yes, and I will say I have great admiration for Two Yellow Buoys, and I have a little bit of Twitter envy, as I wish I had my own two talking buoys in Superior. But nobody has taken that on yet.
No, we do a lot of work behind the scenes to make sure that you never get them. I'll be honest.
The only reason Stuart said that we do not model them after after Lake Superior is because we would never admit that Lake Superior is the best.
So there was a tweet you made, a funny tweet, in response to Roe versus Wade. So when Roe versus Wade was overturned, you came out in the official position of the Lake Superior Twitter account was that you support a woman's right to choose. And then somebody used that for their own political purposes. And then you made a very snarky, very funny reply, which I encourage people to go Google for. I don't think it would necessarily something we need to link to in our show notes. But it was very funny and very on point. But so what was that like? So then all of a sudden everything started blowing up, right? And you say that the course got changed. What was that like exactly?
Well, it's, as I said before, I generally stay on topic with water puns, lake puns, teasing other lakes for being inferior, spreading Great Lakes science and beautiful photography. It's great to see all the photography across Lake Superior. And I love the weather conditions and the inclement weather. And generally the tweets are in that vein. Once in a while, there's a few tweets that step outside of that and a couple of political cold takes, as the lake would say. And the interesting thing is it went viral more than anything I've ever experienced in my life. And, because of it, Lake Superior was actually a trending topic on Twitter, which was, I guess, a new achievement unlocked. But I took a political stance and was happy to do so. But I was nervous thinking that, this will upset some people and maybe the following will go down, but it was too important to me to ignore. And it took 10 to 12 years to accumulate 40,000 followers. And in the course of 2 weeks, I accumulated an additional 170,000 followers.
No way.
So
that is amazing.
Essentially quintupled in a matter of 2 weeks. And it was extremely hard to look away. I do have other tasks and responsibilities in my life that need to be attained to. But it was hard to address those. I mean, it was really hard to look away. It was exciting and fun. There were other news interviews and opportunities like this. And it was all out of a couple, like I said, cold political takes. But I'm excited now is that I have this huge new audience that I now get to expose the Great Lakes to and Lake Superior to and all the wonderful things about it.
That is amazing. Talk about all of a sudden being in the limelight. I mean, not that you weren't before, but that's amazing. You had mentioned, obviously this is one of the more memorable moments, the Roe v. Wade comment and reply, but what are some other memorable moments that you've had on the Twitter account? What are some of your favorite tweets?
Well, there are other geological features on Twitter as well. And there was a pretty intense discussion several years ago between some Twitter volcanoes and if volcanoes or lakes are the greater geological feature. And primarily a few volcanoes from Washington and Oregon, I believe. And it was really fun banter to go back and forth with volcanoes on Twitter. And that's what I love about this platform is it allows for geological features to argue with each other.
But the answer to that is clearly volcanoes, right? What is the counter argument for volcanoes not being? I mean, volcanoes blow up and stuff. What does a lake do?
Well, the lake will make the argument that volcanoes take life, while freshwater lakes are an abundance of giving life to various mammals and creatures.
Fair enough.
However, I myself have learned a lot about the history, about the Great Lakes, the geography, the geology, and simply put, they wouldn't be here without volcanoes. So we are all tied together. Another favorite thing, a tradition of the Lake Superior Twitter account is that not most years I do a live tweeting of the Super Bowl. And but it's all replaced with fish puns. So the Super Bowl becomes the Superior Bowl. The kickoff becomes the fish off. And as we know, the New England Patriots were in it many times, and they always became the New England Perch. And I forget which team became the Freighters, and the San Francisco 49ers became the San Francisco Freighters. So I will live tweet watching the Super Bowl. And as somebody gets a penalty in the game, I will live tweet that player got a penalty for littering on the beach. And that's always been a really fun way to participate in one of America's biggest traditions, the Super Bowl, and to really kind of find this voice on the fly of crafting that is a real creative challenge, but a lot of fun.
That's something else. So I mean, it's just a creative exercise. In all honesty, you strike me as someone, and again, this is no joke, audience. I have no idea who the person is. He has to remain anonymous. I didn't even know it was a he until he said hello. And we just interacted through direct messages on Twitter. But in your heart, in all honesty, you remind me of somebody who would work for Sea Grant, in that it's just that idea that science is cool. Here's how we can use science to promote, sustainability and this wonderful resource and things like that. And so it brings that to mind, and it tickles my heart to hear that. Another thing that you do each year, they caught me off guard. So the gist of our show, the conceit behind it is that I am from the Gulf South and lived there for the first 30 some years of my life. And then I moved up to Purdue in order to take this job at Illinois Indiana Sea Grant. And so I'm using this show to learn about the Great Lakes because I need to know about the Great Lakes in order to do my job better. So I might as well kill two birds with one stone, assuming birds exist, which is a different... Anyway, one thing that caught me off guard is every year still, I think, you commemorate the Edmund Fitzgerald, the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald,
yes.
by tolling out the names, right? What caught me off guard about that was I didn't realize how recent it was. There are still people who are alive who knew people probably on the Edmund Fitzgerald. What gave you the idea to do that, and what goes into that every year?
It's a time of year that for this account that is very sassy, has a big superiority complex. I think it's a reminder to be humble for this really solemn thing that occurred. And there are relatives of those sailors who are still living. And one year I just thought it would be very fitting to recognize all of those names one by one with individual tweets. And as the famous song goes, the church bells chime 29 times. And I just, I thought it would actually be really powerful to, in some instances, to drop the humor and to just lay it out as it is. And these were real people whose lives were lost. And that's something that I'm delicate towards. I'm delicate towards the subjects of the account of, there are lives lost on the Great Lakes related to water safety, boating accidents, kayaking accidents. And I do like to remain sensitive, on certain subjects.
That's what caught me off guard. Where I did notice that tone change all of a sudden, and I thought it was weird. And then I went and researched it because again I know the song, but not well enough. It's not as popular, I think, in the Gulf South as it is here.
Yes.
So do people respond? I feel like most of the response to that tone change is positive. Is it mainly positive? Do people say, what's going on with this or?
Oh no, it's absolutely positive. I think people like seeing that, more down to earth personality as well, which comes out in some of the different stances. There are some of the cold takes, or when I lean a little more politically, it will be about the environment, climate change, and different things, where I try to say it straight, and to remove the voice of that character, to stand firm about where this lake stands on an issue. So I think it's, I don't want the account to be only about being funny and punny and like sassy. I want to expand beyond that as well.
Well, to move on to something a little less serious, I feel like as Lake Superior, if you are truly the most superior Great Lake, you would know how many baseballs that your lake can hold. I mean,
How
as
many?
as the greatest American pastime, if you had to guess, or do you know, how many baseballs can Lake Superior hold? Because I know how many Lake Michigan can hold, and so if you don't have an answer, I guess that means that Lake Michigan is the greatest lake.
Well, we already know that I hold more baseballs than Lake Michigan will ever hold. So let's back up. We know that Lake Superior, hold roughly 3 quadrillion gallons of water. To my rough knowledge, I believe a gallon container can hold about maybe 9 baseballs. So give or take, we're looking at 27 to 30 quadrillion baseballs regulation size.
I love it. Lake Michigan can hold 22.6 quadrillion.
Okay.
I guess we'll give this one to you.
Okay, so we're in the same ballpark. Yeah, I think I might have to round up a
But
little more.
Yeah. Well, you really are the gloat. Okay, one more sticky thing. Now that I'm thinking about it, I should have prepared you for this. I apologize for not. But since you're here, we like to do stupid lists. So and so let me explain how this works. Well, it never works. It's always my fault, so I apologize, but that's where we are. So what we're going to do is I'm going to ask you for your top 3 facts. Speaking of how many baseballs it can hold, top 3 facts about Lake Superior. We'll count them down from 3 to 1, and we'll start with 3. And the way it's going to work is I'm going to give a drum roll, and then you're going to say the fact, and then I'm going to play a sound effect of Titus Seilheimer saying "woo," and then we'll talk about that fact. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right, so your top 3 facts about Lake Superior. Number 3.
I hold 3 quadrillion gallons of water.
Actually, they were kidding around. Like 3 quadrillion gallons of water, and that's a lot of baseballs. And so that's the largest Great Lake by volume, right? Where's it fit worldwide?
Yes, in volume, I will admit there are a couple lakes with more volume, even here in the U.S. I believe Crater Lake is our most voluminous lake in the U.S., I believe. And there is this pesky little lake called Lake Baikal in Russia, which I don't even believe exists. I think it's propaganda. So I always like to tease Baikal. But I believe the stat is that Superior, you can empty Superior and it would fill every Great Lake, including 2 extra Lake Eries.
A couple bonus Lake Eries. I like it. The number 2 fact about Lake Superior. Hold on.
It would take 693 years to resurface Lake Superior using a single Zamboni.
How did you figure that out?
That's so weird.
That's a rough estimate, and that does not include coffee breaks and oil changes for a single Zamboni.
Right. Zamboni drivers got to pee, right?
Yeah. The math has been done, and I believe it was the surface area of Lake Superior is about the equivalent of 52 million NHL ice surfaces. So that puts it into a little bit of context just about how big it is.
And the number 1 fact about Lake Superior is...
I'm the greatest lake of all time.
There it is.
Okay, let's give Let's give you a real fact.
All right, hold on.
According to Great Lakes ice cover history, going back to the earlier mid-70s, Lake Superior has been 100% covered with ice on only one day. And I believe that day was mid-March of 1996.
So what happened in mid-March of 96? Oh, in March too. That's rough. It should be warming up by then.
Yeah, I mean, so peak Lake Superior ice cover is always mid-March. That's always when it's at its max. And yeah, you know, there's several years where it's been 90% frozen over, but according to I believe it's called the Great Lakes Forecasting System, Coastal Forecasting System, only once has it been frozen over entirely.
Well, Lake Superior, the gentleman behind the Lake Superior account, this has all been really interesting learning and, you know, all about you and the account and all of that. But that's actually not why we invited you here on Teach Me About the Great Lakes this week. The reason that we invited you here on Teach Me About the Great Lakes is to ask two questions. The first of which is this. If you could choose to have a great donut for breakfast or a great sandwich for lunch, which one would you choose?
Oh, that's a good question. I would have a great sandwich for lunch.
Great sandwich for lunch. And so then the next question, normally I will be more broad. Next time I'm in Lake Superior region, right? I go kind of a little northwest of here. Where should I go to get a really good sandwich?
A really good sandwich. There's a little fish place downtown Duluth, a little fish market, which has a killer salmon sandwich.
Really?
I'll have to get the specifics.
So did the salmon kill you, or is it just... No, I'm just kidding. Okay. A fish market in... A salmon sandwich. So how do they make it? I've never had a salmon sandwich. Is it... Wait, no, I know this place. Someone else recommended it the other day during a different episode. Hold on, I'll have to find it. It's called... yes, what is the name of this market? Do you remember it?
I believe it's called Northern Water Smokehouse. I am an advocate of an open Cajun whitefish sandwich.
And for the final question, what is a special place in the Great Lakes that you'd like to share with our audience, and what makes it so special?
Wow, that's a big question. I think any place that you can get to an elevation. You know, I am not a scientist, but I do like these little factoids. And I believe when humans stand at the shore of the Great Lakes, any lake, it is approximately something like 8 miles we see to the horizon. And that's it. You know, and to consider that Lake Superior is 140 miles across and 320 miles in breadth. We see such a tiny sliver of the lake. And even when we go up to an elevation, like the Palisades or some places in Michigan and in Ontario, we are seeing such a tiny sliver. I think it is impossible to feel that true scope of how big these lakes are, especially, you know, you consider Lake Superior as 2 countries and 3 states, and, you know, takes several days to drive around.
Well, anonymous human behind the Lake Superior Twitter feed, thank you so much for coming on and teaching us all about the Great Lakes.
Hey, it's a pleasure. I'm happy to come across your your podcast, and all the best. Thanks for doing what you do.
Yeah, thank you. All right.
Thank you so much.
That was a fascinating interview with an interesting and strangely influential Twitter account, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was cool. I cannot believe that he shot up by like 180,000 followers in the course of 2 weeks. That is wild.
It is, and I bet it changes the relationship. Like, you love to hear, or people love to talk about Twitter as like a toxic hell site or whatever. I'm sure he got exposed to some of that in addition to lots of thumbs up and everything. I bet it was surprisingly stressful, actually.
Yeah.
Well, Hope, what do you got going on lately? Anything cool communication-wise coming on the website? What should we point people to?
That is a great question. If you guys are worried about drought or anything affecting your grass, go over to LondLakeMidwest.org and you can find all of the eco-friendly ways to care for your lawn from, all year round. We have seasonal calendars that gives you monthly to-dos.
That sounds good. Teach Me About the Great Lakes is brought to you by the fine people at Illinois Indiana Sea Grant. We encourage you to check out the great work we do at iiseagrant.org and at ILIN Sea Grant on Facebook, Twitter, other social media. Check out our Insta. Check out Londa Lake. Check it all out. Teach Me About the Great Lakes is produced by Hope Charters, Carolyn Foley, Megan Gunn, and Reedy Miles. Ethan Chitty is our associate producer and our fixer. Our super fun podcast artwork is by Joel Davenport, although I just found out that the little tube coming from the scuba diver's neck should be black, not yellow, according to one of our interns. The show is edited by the awesome Quinn Rose, and I encourage you to check out her work at aspiringrobot.com. If you have a question or comment about the show, please email it to teachmeaboutthegreatLakes@gmail.com or leave a message on our hotline, 765-496-IISG. Hey, we haven't heard from you in a hotline in a while. Give that a call. We'll play it on the air. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Teach Great Lakes. Hey, everybody, thank you so much for listening, and keep grading those lakes.